We'll continue with Ms. Uwat's testimony. And you remain under oath. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Uwat, are you familiar with the Office of Civil Rights, the Title IX division of the federal government?
Yes.
Okay, and do you know what it is that they're responsible to do?
Generally, yes.
As you understand it, what are their responsibilities?
I believe that they guide policy about how policies around equal opportunity, sexual harassment, related behaviors are conducted in public institutions.
The training that you mentioned and the other activities that MSU engaged in after the 2011 Dear Colleague letter, were those in response to following OC or the Office of Civil Rights' guidance on the way they were supposed to handle sexual assault and sexual harassment on MSU's campus?
Yes. There were some policy changes, procedural changes as well as changes.
It's my understanding that there was actually a new policy adopted in 2011. Were you part of that?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. And generally, what does Title IX have to do with the college? What is it that its primary connection is?
Well, I think there are several. Well, one has to do with equal opportunities for men and women across the board. And I think the other is around making sure that there are conditions in the institution that allow for equal opportunity in ways that allow full participation without discrimination.
And do you know whether or not that the Office of Civil Rights, Title IX, is also a flow-through in terms of federal money to MSU and other colleges?
I'm not aware of a flow-through to colleges, no.
Okay. Are they a funding source for, is the Office of Civil Rights part of the Department of Education funding of MSU?
My understanding of the relationship, and I could be wrong, I'm answering your question as best I understand it, is that compliance with those regulations may affect the availability of funding, like federal financial aid.
Okay. Now, I was asking you about your responsibilities in 2014. And were you aware of the review process for a position at MSU in 2014?
I was aware that we had a physician who was being reviewed, and it was related to his practice.
Okay. And what is that process for reviewing a physician? What's supposed to happen?
If the concern is around medical outcomes or medical practice, there is an office of peer review, quality and peer review within the health team that reviews records and makes a recommendation.
And make a recommendation to whom?
If it is a negative review and there are concerns, it's to the executive board of the health team.
Would that ultimately at some point come up to you because that would be a faculty member under your supervision?
I was a member of that board, so I would have been one of the people who would have looked at that report.
With regard to the sexual assault, sexual harassment policy, if there were a violation of that policy by a faculty member and there were some type of finding, would that also come up to you?
If it was a typical negative outcome of an investigation, Not necessarily, no.
And what do you mean by typical?
There are frequently concerns raised about faculty or staff or students, for that matter, where there is an alleged violation around discrimination or harassment, and those don't always come to me, no.
In the Nassar case, it was an allegation of sexual assault. You're aware of that, aren't you?
I am.
And was that an investigation that at some point should have or would have come up to you?
If there had been a finding, a negative finding, it might have come to me.
Now, I'd asked you about whether or not when you were first contacted, it was your understanding he was or was not seeing patients. Do you remember me asking you that?
I do.
And so during the review period, was it your understanding that he would not be seeing patients until the review was completed?
I don't recall asking the question. I don't recall asking that question.
With the nature of the allegation being a sexual assault on a patient, would it be your expectation that he would not be seeing patients during the time of the review?
If the
matter lack of foundation, how would she know that?
Is that something you would know or not?
I know that if the allegation was sexual assault, the individual would likely not be seeing a patient.
Okay. Were you ever consulted prior to Dr. Nassar beginning to see patients again?
I was not.
Did you ever see the Title IX report regarding the sexual assault investigation against Larry Nassar?
I did.
How did you end up seeing it?
I saw it in the fall of 2016 as part of a larger report.
What was the larger report?
It was just a compilation of a variety of things related to Larry Nassar.
And was there a time that you became aware of lawsuits being filed against the university because of Larry Nassar's actions?
Yes.
Do you recall when you became aware of the lawsuits?
I don't recall exactly, no.
Do you recall whether or not it was prior to President Simon's resignation?
It was prior to that, yes.
How did you become aware of the lawsuits?
I can't be specific. I'm sure it was in the context of some regular meetings. It may have been through reading the Lansing State Journal. I'm not sure.
Do you recall whether or not it was discussed in the weekly executive group meetings?
I don't recall specifically. I am sure it was.
Based on your contact with President Simon over at least 12 years, right? Were there particular areas of the university that she typically focused on?
I couldn't describe it as particular areas that she focused on. No.
Were there areas that she expressed more interest in?
I can't describe it as areas of more interest because she had served in a variety of roles. She had deep knowledge of different areas of the university.
Based on your contact with the other individuals in the cabinet, Would those people have, including yourself, the opportunity to go directly to President Simon with issues?
Yes, I believe so.
And I think as you described the cabinet, were those all people who had a direct report to President Simon?
Yes.
In the time that you worked with President Simon, did you ever see her take action that wasn't in the interest of MSU?
I can't recall any time.
How would you describe her relationship with the college as you observed it?
Which college?
I'm sorry, I meant university, not college. You're right, because you have lots of colleges under the university. My mistake. How would you, in your interaction with her, how would you describe President Simon's relationship with Michigan State?
A caretaker, a steward, a planner.
Were you involved in the decision to suspend Larry Nassar?
Yes.
And how did you become involved?
I was part of conversations. Again, I can't recall specific conversations, but conversations over a very short period of time about the allegations, determining what his appointment status was, and then how to remove him immediately from practice, and then remove him from employment.
Do you recall when that was?
I don't. August 2016, but I don't recall specifically.
Were you interviewed by the Michigan State Police in this investigation?
I was.
Do you recall when?
Last March or April.
Do you recall who interviewed you?
Detectives was Detective Arndt, and I'm sorry I don't remember the other detective's name.
Do you recall whether or not they identified themselves as police officers or as detectives with the Michigan State Police?
They did.
And do you recall whether or not they told you that it was a criminal investigation that they were doing?
They did.
So in your 12 years of working with President Simon and meeting with her either on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, did you have the opportunity to observe her management style?
Yes.
How would you describe it?
If I may, perhaps it'd be easier if I speak correctly into the microphone. Thank you, Mr. Teager. Your Honor, this is one of the objections we raised in the brief, so I'll address it. This line of questioning goes to excluded evidence of Ms. Simon's character traits. There is no dispute between the prosecution and the defense that evidence of Dr. Simon's management style and nature is character evidence. Rule 404A specifically says, evidence of a person's character or a trait of character is not admissible for the purpose of proving action in conformity therewith. Similarly, our Court of Appeals in the case of People v. Roper has stated thus, because of that rule, quote, a prosecutor may not normally call witnesses to testify about a defendant's character or present evidence of other acts performed by the defendant in order to show that the defendant has a particular character and that the defendant acted in conformity with his or her character with regard to the events at issue. It's very clear this is excluded evidence. Prosecution violated this rule, Your Honor, in their opening statement when Mr. Teeter informed the court, quote, "The evidence will show that she," that is Ms. Simon, "was a hands-on, engaged, detail-oriented manager who required her direct reports to keep her advised of situations," end quote. In light of Mr. Teeter's improper comments, the defense filed the motion in limine in this case. We briefed this issue to exclude any improper testimony from any witness on Ms. Simon's character. In response to our motion, the prosecution is now claiming that it was somehow the defendants who originally put Ms. Simon's character at issue in this case. This is not accurate. To be very clear, the defense has not offered, nor does the defense intend to offer at this preliminary examination, any character evidence regarding Ms. Simon. Specifically, the prosecution contends that two statements made in an opening statement by defense counsel somehow opened the door, allowing them to attack Dr. Simon's character. The first statement that they have quoted in their brief is a statement about the size of MSU, its budget, and its number of employees. Those statements have absolutely nothing to do with Ms. Simon's character. They are factual contentions or arguments or statements, whatever they are. They are clearly about the size of MSU and not Ms. Simon's character or detail-oriented nature. The second statement they've identified is a statement made by defense counsel paraphrasing a conversation between Ms. Simon and Detective Arndt in one of her interviews. And all we said was that Ms. Simon stated, after they opened the door, that it is generally standard practice for Ms. Simon not to be involved in OIE investigations. That is a standard policy, practice, or procedure of MSU. Like the first statement, this statement is about MSU's policies, procedures, and the underlying facts, and it has nothing to do with Ms. Simon's character. In summary, the defense never opened the door to Ms. Simon's character. There are no exceptions that apply to this, and 404A precludes evidence of Dr. Simon's detail-oriented nature or management style or anything like that from coming into the court either by document or testimony. Last, Your Honor, the prosecution cites a couple cases in its briefing on the issue. I think they're actually helpful. Those cases, Your Honor, pertain to claims of self-defense by a victim, where the victim's character and the accuser's character are directly at issue to combat allegations that someone was violent or meek or the like. All those cases are in the self-defense arena. There is a clear exception in this rule, written into the rule, for self-defense. That is not what we have going on here. It's everything that they are trying to introduce is properly excluded under 404A.
Mr. Teeter.
Thank you, Your Honor. We did file a reply to the motion in limine to the court.
And I believe we agreed that it was an issue of character, not of habit.
Correct. And, Your Honor, contrary to counsel's assertion, Mr. Morgenroth actually did raise this issue in his opening statement because he tied the two together. The size of MSU and basically that because of the size of the institution and the amount of people that she was responsible for, that his statement was the implication was being a leader of a large institution she doesn't get involved in specific cases like Tomashow. And his statement is if she did, he said, she would have no time to do anything else. Which clearly raises the issue of she would not be engaged in the level of detail at this level, and therefore creating the presumption that because she's at the head of this large institution that she doesn't involve herself in any of the details. That's clearly raising that issue of her not only personality but character trait for I'm responsible for the big stuff, not responsible for the little stuff. And that opens that issue up for us to then indicate that no, her practice is actually just the opposite. She is a detail-oriented, hands-on, engaged manager on a level of detail. As this witness has already indicated, you're talking about the caretaker, the steward, the planner. She's actively engaged because of her years with the institution and her extensive knowledge of many of the different areas in the university. So this idea that Mr. Morgenroth presented to the court that, you know, I'm up here, all of this happens down here and is beneath me, at least opens the opportunity for us to say, well, no, there's clear evidence that would indicate that's not the case. And so we should have the opportunity to present that. And again, based on the cases that we've cited, it talks about self-defense, but it talks about the concept of whether you can raise the issue in an opening statement and then have that be the basis for us to rebut it. And the answer clearly in those cases is yes, it's raised in the opening statement.
Your Honor, if I may.
Wait.
First, can you refer me to the page in your brief?
Yes, it starts at page 9, and then it runs through page 12. The last parts that I just read to the court are from page 12.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is critical. It's very important because there is a flat prohibition under Rule 404A for character evidence. Nothing Mr. Morgenroth said goes to character evidence. This organizational chart, I'm looking at the first date, and I will quote for the court straight from what Mr. Morgenroth said. The university has $3 billion budget. It has 52,000 students, 14,000 employees plus, and also hundreds of thousands of people going on and off campus to games and everything else. Okay? Your Honor, if we're here to talk about organizational charts or how many faculty or students there are or who reports to who, that's fine. That can come in a different way. That is all Mr. Teeter has identified as why he wants to put character evidence in issue. We did not put character evidence in issue. The fact of how she manages her operation, what her traits are, how she communicates with her staff, that is all clearly prohibited character evidence. Both sides agree on this point. We've cited cases that being detail-oriented and hands-on is character evidence. We simply put, we did not offer anything like that. And unless and until we do, it can't come in. We simply talked about the size, the facts, and the organizational structure. That has nothing to do with Dr. Simon's character.
Your Honor, I totally agree that if that's not what Mr. Morgenroth would have said, it would not have created that inference, but that is in fact what he said. On page 12, we quote his very statement. She didn't get involved in specific cases. If she did, she wouldn't have time to do anything else.
Your Honor, the whole point of this rule is that this kind of evidence cannot be used to show propensity. That is the only reason they want to introduce it today. That is very clear, but it is expressly excluded to show should have, could have, would have, or draw an inference.
Your Honor, are we going to keep going with, because I'll keep responding if he keeps arguing, we can do that.
No, I'm reading. So 404A says, evidence of a person's character or trait is not admissible for the purpose of proving action in conformity therewith on a particular occasion, except. So, the outset sounds like it's not admissible. And then character of accused, Ms. Dr. Simon. Evidence of a pertinent trait of character offered by the prosecution to rebut. A trait of character offered by the accused. So the issue here is, did the defense create a statement that the prosecution is now trying to rebut?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a real stretch to say that general statement about the size of MSU, and of course a president of a university like that has immense responsibilities. I'm not.
It's not that part of the statement we're concerned about, Your Honor. It's the follow-up from Mr. Morgan Roth indicating about her not getting involved in specific cases, because if she did, she'd have no time to do anything else. It's that part of the statement that we're, besides the university and all that, you know, is sort of a way to, you know, indicate she's way too busy for all of that. It's that last
So
part.
where do I find that second statement?
Let's see.
Is it in here, in the same,
It's
your response?
Yeah, page 12. There's a part of a sentence at the bottom, but it's the line right above that.
Okay, by stating that Simon does not involve herself in small matters like individual complaints of sexual assault.
And actually one right above that line.
If she did, he said, she would have no time to do anything else.
Your Honor, may I respond briefly?
Yep, in a moment.
Thank you.
Okay, so this really seems to be the issue. I'm not really sure why this corporal is the way it is, but I wanted to get it right. So Mr. Gutierrez, what is your response? Because it does seem like it went specifically after the reference to the huge budget to she wouldn't have time to do little things like this. So,
Your Honor, a couple things.
okay.
Excuse me, thank you. I'm scrambling to find that statement in the transcript. I don't see it. So I'm not exactly sure. Mr. Teeter is paraphrasing or summarizing his recollection he's representing to the
So
court.
maybe that would be the thing we should do right now is find the exact statement.
Perhaps. Yeah, I think it would be helpful to see the exact statement because as Mr. Teeter acknowledges in his brief, he didn't have the
Get
transcript.
your finger on it within a minute or so.
I don't have the paper transcript, Your Honor. I have it time-stamped on the video, and I can give you those references.
Oh, was there not a transcript prepared at that first day?
I don't have one. We didn't have one.
We have a transcript, Your Honor.
You do? You have it there with you? Are you finding it, Mr. Gutierrez?
I have what I think he's referring to. May I show the court?
Why don't you show Mr. Teeter first and see if that's what he's referring to?
Is that 1:35, 12, 10, 12, or 13:45?
I don't think it's timed.
Oh. Is this the whole?
It's not, no. It's just all I've identified on the issue that could be relevant.
We don't have the entire opening statement, Your Honor. I have the timestamps for the video. But we would ask the court to at least review that, or if we have to hold this line of questioning and produce the written transcript. But there's 3 different spots where those statements, I think, are relevant to this particular inquiry. And so I don't know if we can pull that video and the court can look at it, or...
Shannon, is that possible?
I'd like to respond very briefly on just that narrow issue.
Let me get them.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Are you able to play a video?
I believe so.
Where would it be? On your computer?
Yeah. I don't know how to, I haven't done it with this new program.
Okay. So, Mr. Selford, did you say there was a written transcript?
We have a written transcript, Your Honor, yes.
So, can't we use that to locate?
Yes, it may take us a few minutes to find it, but we can definitely do that.
Yeah, what Mr. Gutierrez showed me was a small excerpt from it, so I don't have the entire one.
Hey, can you work together on it?
Yes.
We need
Yes.
to make a photocopy for you, Mr. Tudor?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, let's take a break for however long it takes. Hopefully not more than 2 minutes or so.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Excuse for a bit. Thank you.
We handed the transcript to you to be able to give your court report.
Okay.
All rise.
Thank you. You may be seated. On the record, People versus Luann Assignment 182261 FY. And we all have transcript of the opening statement of Mr. Morganroth. So, do you need a minute to go over it more?
I don't know.
If you're ready, I'll just ask you each to point out what part you think supports your position, and I'll decide. Mr. Do you need a minute?
What I prefer to do is if Mr. Teeter goes first, then I can see, because they're not marked, what sections he prefer. I'll just listen to what he's saying, and then I'll respond if that's all right.
Are you ready, Mr. Teeter, or do you need a minute?
No, Your Honor. I'm ready.
Okay. Identify it by page and line number, please.
Mr. Morganroth's opening statement starts at page 27. So moving to page 28, starting at line 11 and running through line 15.
Said I did not involve myself in office of what?
OIE, that's at office of institutional equity. Yeah.
Okay.
Would you like a response at each point, Your Honor, or would you like Mr. Teeter's entire contention and then I'll respond?
I'll let him go through. You have 3 entries, is that right?
I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, give me each one, please.
The second one is on page 33,
Okay.
starting at line 22, running through 25, and then it starts again on the next page, page 34, line 1, and running through page 2, line 8. Yeah.
Okay,
And then on that same page, line 19, running through line 25.
okay. Is there another one?
No, Your Honor, the 2 are actually, they went from page 34 to page 35. So our position is, if you look at that as a whole, it certainly has created the implication that this is such a large institution, her responsibilities were so defined that she would not be involved in either of the investigations, specifically the sexual assaults, and then would not be involved, if she were, she wouldn't have time to do anything else. And as related to sexual assault investigations, there were so many that she wouldn't have time to, she'd have nothing else to do with, is the exact quote. So our position is that certainly has created that image and that impression, so we have the opportunity to rebut it.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez.
Yes, Your Honor, I think this is actually pretty helpful. One I'll point out, if you look at each one of these, the context of this discussion is talking about standard practice and policy and procedure for the person in the role of the president. Nowhere does anyone say Ms. Simon is aloof, absent-minded, doesn't pay attention, This is, as I described before, talking about the role, the organizational chart. If you see on page 28, the quote Mr. Teeter read, right in the middle, after the statement, it says, that's standard practice. It does not say Ms. Simon does that because she's aloof or her character is XYZ. Same with the next page on 33. At the bottom, the end of the quote says, and that's when she, meaning the president, is supposed to be involved. Nothing about whether she inserts herself or micromanages. And then third, on the last page, same exact thing. The end of the quote says, and you have the president involved, even though the president or she should never be involved in those until there's a finding. The point is, this is about a matter of practice that the president of the university, as everybody's testified, I believe, that doesn't get involved generally in Title IX investigations. We did not say she is aloof, absent-minded, or anything like that, which is character. All that has been discussed is, in response to the prosecution statement, all that was said was that the person in the role of the president has to follow practices and procedures. There's no character at issue here.
Yeah, just briefly. And that is, she doesn't say the president, she says I. I do not involve myself in OIE investigations. I'm not involved.
Your Honor could see on page 28 that what's going on there, okay? What's going on, the context for this is starting on line 11 through 15 is what Mr. Teeter says. If you back up a few lines and you follow a few lines, what's happening is this is a discussion about Detective Arndt's credibility, okay? This is a discussion about Detective Arndt's credibility. Mr. Morgenroth said, she said to Detective Arndt, I do not involve myself in OIE investigations. That's standard practice. Line 6 through 17. And what did Detective Arndt say after that when she said that? He says, absolutely right. This has nothing to do with Dr. Simon's character. This is about restating a discussion, a dialogue on the record with the detective. Again, it's taken out of context.
Okay. Well, I've got two really good attorneys dealing with this issue. I am going to allow it based on the statement, the opening statements, which I do think opened the door to the issue of character of the accused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
May I ask one more thing to have a continuing objection on this so I don't have to keep rephrasing? Thank you, Your Honor.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think someone's getting Ms. Locke. Remain under oath.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Youatt, right before our break, I asked you the question of how would you describe President Simon's management style at the university?
Careful. She was, again, had deep knowledge of the institution, very engaged in the institution, was interested in how each of her vice presidents handled their particular responsibilities, and was very aware of the way in which they did their work.
When you say how each of her vice presidents handled their responsibilities, what do you mean by that?
I was referring not so much to the daily work they were doing, but the way they approached their work. In terms of being visionary, she was always very interested in who was keeping up in their areas, who had good ideas, the people who were making good hires, who were mentoring their employees, people who were building strong leadership teams. So kind of the health and welfare of each of the dimensions of the institution.
You used the term aware. She was very aware. Why do you say that?
Again, some of it was engagement, her interest in each of the areas, and her regular conversations with individuals.
Did you see that when, for example, at the cabinet meetings, would there be that kind of interaction?
Since many of us were asked to share information about what we were doing, yes, we had a regular roundtable where each person had a chance to share, and then often individuals were asked to make particular presentations about the work in their area.
And when they did that, when they made those presentations, did Ms. Simon ask any follow-up questions or ask for additional detail or make observations that you saw?
She did sometimes, and other times she expected the rest of us to be asking the questions.
Okay. Is she a detail-oriented person based on your 12 years of working with her?
In some areas, yes, and in other areas, less so, like
Okay.
most
Can
of
you
us.
spell out those areas for us?
In my experience, particularly around numbers, because that was her background. Since she began in institutional research, she was very detail-oriented around our budget, our investments, income streams, endowments, and other numbers that have to do with institutional research. So anything that had to do with performance metrics.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. It's dovetails with what we discussed earlier, but if I may approach, and then I'll put it on the record, we can discuss briefly.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. So the corollary to Rule 404 discussing one character evidence is in and out, and specifically in the context if it does come in to rebut something that has been opened, the door's been opened by the defense. Rule 405, the next rule, says how mechanically that happens. It's titled Methods of Proving Character, and there are three takeaways from this rule. One, 405A says, in all cases in which evidence of character or a trait of character of a person is admissible. I believe we're there because that's what the court has just ruled. There are two ways that testimony can come in. One, that is by testimony as to reputation or by testimony in the form of opinion. Now, why that's important is because B is essentially an exclusionary rule. You cannot offer specific instances of a person's conduct to prove propensity unless that character trait is an essential element of the charge. So the interplay between those is that the only way to offer this under the circumstances we have now based on the court's ruling is that the witness can testify to certain reputation that Ms. Simon may have in the community or certain opinion, but specific instances, again, because it's so dangerous, the rules say you do not get into specific instances of similar conduct to prove propensity unless it's an essential element of the charge.
Mr. Teeter?
Yes, Your Honor. Under 405A, I think that's exactly what we're talking about, is her opinion with regard to management style, the detail-oriented nature of Ms. Simon's contact and interaction with other people, and therefore we believe that it's admissible. We've already ruled it's admissible under 404, and that she's rendering her opinion with regard to 405A.
Okay. So
Your
it
Honor.
sounds like you need to stay away from specific instances
I can do that.
of conduct.
And why I object is because this line of questioning is, did you see in this conduct and in this context, in this meeting, certain things stated by the defendant or done by the defendant? We can't do that. Specific prior instances are excluded.
Okay. So, opinion. Her, Ms. Hewitt's opinion or her knowledge of her reputation without specific specific instances of Dr. Simon's conduct.
That's fine, Your Honor. In your time at MSU, you'd indicated you have these regular cabinet meetings where you have regular contact with the other direct reports to President Simon, the other vice presidents?
That's correct.
Okay. And are you familiar with what President Simon's reputation would be with regard to whether or not she's a detail-oriented person?
I think that generally her reputation was paying attention to detail, yes.
And that's also your specific opinion, having dealt directly with her?
In my opinion is in some areas very detail-oriented and in other areas, no.
In your one-on-one meetings with her, were those, did she ask you detailed questions about your area?
Again, Your Honor, same objection. This is a specific instance of certain meetings, certain conversations, and certain conduct. This is not a question about an opinion or a reputation.
Okay, so can you turn that into an opinion?
Yes, I can rephrase it. Based on your contact with her in one-on-one meetings, did that help you form the basis for your opinion with regard to her her management style and whether or not she's a detail-oriented person? Or was it based on something else?
My opinion that she was sometimes detail-oriented and sometimes not was based on my experience.
Okay. And I take it you have some areas that she was more interested in than others?
Yes.
Okay. If it related to MSU's public image, what is your opinion with regard to whether or not that general area would be something that she would be more interested in or not?
Same objection, Your Honor. This is exactly what is excluded. A specific instance, a specific situation. The witness can. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Same objection, Your Honor. This is the question was about a specific context or instance. Again, the witness can testify generally about her opinion on these character traits. The witness can testify generally about the opinion of others or the reputation on these character traits. The witness cannot testify about specific instances where she observed this observed this particular trait of character.
But is this an opinion about a rather general field like this? I don't think that's a specific instance of conduct that they're talking about. So I think you can ask her about her opinion of the reputation of the school or whatever. I think that's general. Okay.
Your Honor, may I have a continuing objection on that point? Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Yard, do you remember my question?
I would prefer you restate it, please.
That's fine. Based on your interaction and the years that you were at MSU, do you have an opinion with regard to whether or not, if there were an area that MSU could look bad publicly, that it could be damaging to the reputation of the school or whatever, do you have an opinion whether or not that would be an area that Ms. Simon would have more interest in or less?
Your Honor, I'm going to object based on the vagueness of the question. It's vague and ambiguous. It would have to, I assume, depend on what the particular facts or circumstances were to ask that question in a vacuum. It's just vague and ambiguous.
Your Honor, now they've succeeded in objecting on opposite sides of the exact same question.
Yeah, I'm going to allow it because the word opinion is rather vague.
Thank you, Your Honor.
To state an opinion, I would have described it as being concerned about risk. risk to people inside the university, risk to the work of the university, risk to the future of the university.
We have no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Hewitt. My name is Lee Silver. I'm one of the attorneys representing Dr. Simon. You and I have never met before. Is that true?
That is correct.
As I understand it, you have been the provost of Michigan State since January of 2013. You became the acting provost then in January of 2013, and then you were named provost after a national search in April of 2014. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's only one provost at Michigan State University. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the provost is kind of the second in command at Michigan State, meaning there is only one person who outranks the provost, and that would be the president, correct?
That's correct.
And as the provost, you are responsible for all of the academic activity at the university, including deans and faculty. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that was true in 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And as provost, you are also responsible for all of the degree-granting colleges at Michigan State University, correct?
That's correct.
And how many degree-granting colleges are there at MSU?
17 plus the College of Law.
All right. And one of those 17 degree-granting colleges that you are responsible for is COM, or the College of Osteopathic Medicine, correct?
That is correct.
And that is the college where Larry Nassar worked in 2014, correct?
That is correct.
And Larry Nassar was a faculty member at that time, is that true?
Yes.
And each degree-granting college has a dean, correct?
Yes.
And those deans of each of the degree-granting colleges reports directly to you, correct?
That is correct.
And so there's no one between the dean and yourself, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in 2014, the dean for the College of Osteopathic Medicine, who reported directly to you, was William Strample, correct?
It was.
And you were Strample's immediate supervisor?
I was.
You were responsible for reviewing Strample?
I was.
And you were responsible for determining his raise each year?
I was.
And you reappointed Strample as dean in 2015, is that correct?
I did.
And did you also terminate Strample?
I did.
Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and ask you this important question. Ms. Hewitt, prior to 2016, did you ever have any communications with Luanna Simon regarding Amanda Tomaszow's complaint or Larry Nassar?
I do not believe so. I have no recollection of that.
Did you participate in the investigation of the complaint against Nassar in 2014?
I did not.
Were you kept informed of the status of the investigation into the complaint against Nassar in 2014?
I was not.
As the provost responsible for faculty in the College of Osteopathic Medicine, did you see a copy of the investigative report issued by the Office of I-3 into the complaint against Larry Nassar?
Prior to 2016?
Yes.
I did not.
Prior to 2016, were you aware of the results or findings of the investigation into the complaint against Larry Nassar?
I was not.
Prior to 2016, were you aware of the protocol that was put in place for Larry Nasser?
I was not.
Did you even know in 2014 that Larry Nasser was under review?
I did.
Okay, and this is important, so I'm going to go slow here. You were interviewed on 3 separate occasions by the Michigan State Police and/or the Attorney General, correct?
That's correct.
Your Detectives Kavanaugh and Arndt were present for all 3 of your sessions, correct?
Correct.
And your first interview was on March 15, 2018, correct?
You have the date. I
Take
don't
my word
recall.
for it.
Yes,
Okay.
I'll take your word for it.
All right, thank you. And that interview was conducted by Detectives Kavanaugh and Arndt, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in this first interview, you were asked some questions about what you knew about Larry Nasser in 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And one of the questions you were asked is essentially the same question that Dr. Simon was asked, namely, were you aware that Larry Nasser was under review in 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And when you were asked this question in March of 2018 by Detectives Kavanaugh and Arndt, did you recall that you had, in fact, been told in 2014 that Nasser was under review?
I said that, I'm sorry, please ask the question piece of that again.
When you were asked this
Yes.
question in March of 2018, namely, did you know that Nasser was under review in 2014, didn't you tell the detectives that you were not aware in 2014 that Nasser was under review?
That's exactly what I told them, and that I didn't know his name.
Right. And you mentioned in response to questions from Mr. Teeter that you were shown a document that refreshed your recollection. Do you recall that?
I do.
All right, so let's set this stage and make sure everybody is clear about this. When you were asked the question in your first interview by Arndt and Kavanaugh, you said, no, I was not aware in 2014 that Nasser was under review. True?
That's true.
And then sometime later, somebody showed you a document that refreshed your recollection. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And who showed you that document?
It was someone in my interview with the Attorney General.
It was somebody from either the Michigan State Police or the Attorney General's office, correct?
That is correct.
And when did they show you this document that refreshed your recollection?
I believe it was during my second questioning.
All right, so if it was during your second questioning, that would be August 21. Because we know your 3 interviews took place on March 15, August 21, and September 5. Does that sound about right to you?
Yes.
All right. So that would mean that 5 months later, after you gave your testimony or your statement in your interview that you did not know that Nasser was under review in 2014, the police or the Attorney General showed you a document that refreshed your recollection, correct?
That is correct.
And what was this document that they showed you that refreshed your recollection?
It was an agenda that then Dean Strample had brought to a meeting where there were a number of items, 10 to 15 items, where he was providing updates on a number of topics, everything from an agreement with a historically black college to some curriculum changes. And I don't recall the typed agenda item, but I had written in my own hand the word Nasser.
All right. And that was an agenda from a meeting that you had with Strample in June of 2014, correct?
That's correct.
So until the officers showed you this agenda, this document that refreshed your recollection 5 months after you gave your original testimony, you did not remember ever hearing Nasser's name in 2014 or that Larry Nasser was under review, correct?
That is correct.
Even though you obviously had been told in June of 2014 that Nasser was under review because this document refreshed your recollection, correct?
It is correct.
And after June of 2014, the next time you ever heard the name Larry Nassar was when the Indy Star article came out sometime in the fall of 2016, correct?
That is correct.
And did you know in 2014 what the complaint against Larry Nassar was about?
To best of my recollection, I did not.
Okay, so even though apparently through this document and refreshing your recollection that Strample had mentioned Nassar to you 4 years earlier, to the best of your recollection, you didn't know he was under review for sexual assault, correct?
That is correct.
Incidentally, Ms. Hewitt, did the name Larry Nassar mean anything to you in 2014?
It did not.
Did you even know who Larry Nassar was in 2014 prior to Dean Strample mentioning his name to you?
I did not.
Did you even know there was an Olympic doctor on the faculty in 2014?
I did not.
To the best of your knowledge, did Luana Simon ever do anything to interfere, impede, or influence the investigation of Amanda Tomaszow's complaint into Larry Nassar?
I don't know of anything, no.
Paulette Russell, you were asked some questions about her. Do you recall that?
Yes,
And she, in 2014, was the head of I3. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Did Paulette Russell, as the head of I3, report directly to you?
No, she did not.
As provost, did you approve the budget for I3?
Maybe? Yes. That's an inconclusive answer. I think I was not the only one involved in that budget.
All right. You played an important role
I'm sure I played a role, yes.
in approving the budget.
I'm
Okay.
sure I did.
And you are aware that Michigan State has procedures or protocols in place for handling sexual assault complaints like the one against Nassar in 2014, correct?
Correct.
And in 2014, that procedure or protocol called for I3 to take complaints of this nature and to investigate them. Is that right?
That's correct.
And nothing in those procedures or those protocols required the university president, or for that matter, you as the provost, to get involved in those complaints or investigations, at least until there was a finding of responsibility, correct?
That's correct.
And that was true in 2014, correct?
Yes, it was.
Are you aware that Luana Simon and Paulette Granberry Russell had periodic one-on-one meetings?
I think I was aware, yes.
Okay. And you obviously, based on your answer, I assume, did not attend or participate in any of the meetings between Dr. Simon and Ms. Russell. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So you obviously wouldn't have any idea what information Dr. Simon received or requested during any of these meetings. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You were also asked some questions about the decision to fire Larry Nassar. Do you recall that?
I do.
And I think you said you were involved in the decision to fire Nassar, correct?
That's correct.
And Luana Simon was also involved in that decision to fire Larry Nassar. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
You were also asked some questions about the Dear Colleague letter. Do you recall that?
I do.
You were not involved personally in responding to the Dear Colleague letter, correct?
That is correct.
The Office of the General Counsel took the lead in responding to the Dear Colleague letter. Is that correct?
It is.
And I assume you're aware that the Dear Colleague letter went to virtually every public college or university in the country. Is that true?
That is true.
So in other words, nothing special, nothing unique, nothing peculiar to Michigan State in terms of receiving the Dear Colleague letter, correct?
That is correct. It was a change across all institutions, a federal change.
And the resolution agreement that you were asked about, do you recall Mr. Teeter asking you some questions about that?
I do.
The resolution agreement had to do with 2 or 3 student complaints that were filed before Amanda Tomashow ever submitted her complaint against Larry Nassar. Is that true?
That is correct.
And is it also true that you personally were not involved in the OCR investigation that resulted in the resolution agreement in 2015?
That's correct.
Now, you were also asked some questions whether the OCR investigation was discussed at some meetings, and I want to drill down and ask you a little bit about that very briefly. Do you recall specifically, Ms. Youatt, discussing the OCR investigation at any cabinet meetings?
I do not recall any specific conversation. No, I don't.
Do you recall any specific discussions regarding the OCR investigation at any executive meetings? Executive board meetings?
I do not recall the specific content of any of those conversations.
And is it also true, to the best of your knowledge, that the OCR investigation and the resolution agreement did not result in any type of fine, any type of penalty, any type of sanction whatsoever against Michigan State?
My recollection or my knowledge is that there were no sanctions, no penalties, only our response in improving processes.
And Michigan State was always interested, I assume, in improving all of its processes, whether related to how it handled sexual assault or sexual harassment complaints or anything else, right?
That's correct. And in fact, we had made many of the process changes, frankly, before the agreement.
Right. So it's always a work in progress to make these policies, these procedures, these processes as best or as good as they can possibly be. Fair statement?
That's fair.
And the primary finding of the OCR investigation was that Title IX investigations at MSU were slow. They took a little too long. That was the primary finding, correct?
That is correct.
Just like with the Dear Colleague letter, is it your understanding that the response to the OCR investigation was primarily handled through the Office of the General Counsel?
I'm sorry, ask the end of that question again.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I probably messed it up with what I said about the Dear Colleague letter. The question is really, is it your understanding that the response or the handling of the OCR investigation was primarily done through the Office of the General Counsel?
That is correct.
And likewise, the Office of the General Counsel primarily handled the resolution agreement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And you do not recall having any specific discussions with Dr. Simon regarding the OCR investigation. Is that true?
I do not recall having any specific conversations with her about that. No, I don't.
Now, you were also asked a couple questions about whether Nassar should have returned to work while the review was going on. Do you recall that?
I do.
Let's start with this. Do you know whether Larry Nassar actually did return to work during the time he was under review?
Do I have personal knowledge?
Yes.
I do not.
And are you aware of any policies or procedures at Michigan State that would prohibit somebody, faculty member, doctor at College of Osteopathic Medicine or something else from working while a review is pending?
I'm unclear about what the policy might have been at that time. The policies are different now.
And, okay, so you don't know whether there was a policy or procedure in place in 2014 that would or would not permit somebody like Nasser, who was undergoing review, to work during the pendency of the review. Is that true?
It would depend on the nature of the review, whether or not they were continuing to work or not.
But was there a policy or procedure that delineated or set forth, Ms. Hewitt, under what circumstances somebody could or could not return to work during the pendency of a review?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. No further questions. Oh, let me just ask Mr. Morgan. Okay, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Just briefly, Ms. Hewitt, you were asked about, start with the last question first, whether or not there was a policy or procedure that would require Nasser not to be allowed to work, but was there a practice that did that? I think, for example, the example you gave us about the doctor that was under review for malpractice, was he allowed to see patients during that time?
Objection, lack of foundation. He has to show that this witness was aware of the practice of whether people under review could or could not return to work, and he hasn't laid the foundation for that.
Well, then we'd move to strike the entire line of questioning with regard to whether or not there was a policy or procedure. This witness has already indicated that she had, whether or not she had knowledge about that. My question is, was there a practice either in lieu of or in addition to any policy or procedure that Mr. Silver just asked about?
It's apples and oranges. I asked about policies or procedures. She said no, or she was not aware of it. Now he's asking about practices, and I'm simply saying before he can ask the question, he has to show that the witness is aware of what the practices were.
Can you ask for that?
Sure. You were asked about whether or not there was a policy or procedure with regard to whether or not Nasser would be allowed to work. Do you recall that question?
I do.
And I believe your answer was you were not aware of one?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know whether or not it was a practice with regard to a doctor who's under review, whether or not they're allowed to see patients? And I think specifically referring to your testimony about the doctor that was under review for malpractice. Do you know whether or not he was allowed to see patients?
I don't know.
Okay. Was it your understanding that he would or would not be allowed to?
Are you referring to the doctor for malpractice?
Yes, first the malpractice one. What was your understanding of what was happening?
The quality and peer review committee in that instance, I learned later, recommended that he not work during that time.
And then with regard to Dr. Nasser, do you know whether or not there was a practice in the College of Osteopathic Medicine, whether or not he would be seeing patients while he was under review?
I don't know.
Okay, and what was your understanding, though, after you spoke with Dean Strample? Do you know whether or not he was going to continue to see patients?
Objection asked and answered. She's already testified. She doesn't know whether he was permitted to see patients during the pendency of his review.
And then I added whether or not after meeting with Dr. Strample, if that she was aware of that.
I did not know.
Okay. You were asked about specific discussions at the cabinet meeting with regard to OCR investigation and specific content of discussions, okay? And I understand it's been 4.5 years, but what is your best recollection with regard to those topics? Was the OCR investigation discussed at either cabinet meetings or executive meetings? Not specific content of those discussions.
I'm going to object, Your Honor. Asked and answered. She said she does not recall whether that was specifically discussed at those meetings.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I'm not asking about the specific content of discussions, because that was the question asked by Mr. Silver. I'm asking whether or not the general discussion of the OCR investigation occurred at either cabinet or executive meetings.
I thought it was general contact, but we're spending more time than getting her to answer by arguing about it. So,
Same objection, Your Honor, for the record.
sure.
I don't recall the specific conversation as I've said, but I also said these things were very important, and I'm sure they were discussed.
Okay. You were asked a question about whether or not you played a role in the I-3 budget. Do you recall that question?
I do.
And Did President Simon also play a role in the I-3 budget?
She was not part of budget discussions, no.
Do you know whether or not she ever reviewed either I-3's budget with you or with Ms. Russell? And when I say budget, I mean staffing and all of that.
I don't have direct knowledge of that, no.
No further questions, John.
Thank you very much for your testimony. You're excused.
Thank you.
Next witness, please.
We call Marty Howell. Oh, we'd ask that this witness be excused, Your Honor.
Yes. Raise your right hand. You promise to tell the truth and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
Please be seated. State your name and spell both your first and last names.
Marty Howe, M-A-R-T-I, H-O-W-E.
Thank you. Mr. Teeter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Howell, where are you currently employed?
I'm retired.
And where did you retire from?
Michigan State University
And how long did you work at Michigan State University?
for 17 years.
In what areas did you work in at MSU?
I worked in the general counsel's office initially, and then the president's office. And then the last 10 years I worked directly with President Simon.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The last 10 years I worked directly with President Simon.
Person you know is President Simon. Could you point to her and describe for the record what she's wearing?
Yeah, she's at that table, and she has on, looks like a gray vest and a black shirt.
May the record reflect she's identified the defendant.
It shall so reflect.
So during that last 10 years when you worked with President Simon, did you report directly to her?
Yes, I did.
Do you know who else reported directly to Luanna K. Simon?
All of her vice presidents, the chief of police, perhaps the deans, I'm not sure.
When did you retire?
January of 2015.
The people who were direct reports to President Simon, did they have regularly scheduled meetings with her?
Yes, they did.
How often?
It varied. Some of them met with her weekly, some bi-weekly, some monthly.
How often did Paulette Granberry Russell meet with President Simon?
She was monthly.
What was your primary responsibility in working with President Simon?
The biggest responsibility, I guess, was keeping her calendar, scheduling her appointments, preparing materials for her appointments. I also arranged for her travel, whether it was local or statewide, national, international. Just keeping things running smoothly in a very hectic office.
How often did you see President Simon?
I saw her daily.
You testified part of your responsibilities were to maintain her calendar. What type of calendar did she maintain?
It was a electronic calendar.
Were all of her meetings on the calendar?
Yes, unless something was scheduled at the last minute, where sometimes some people would drop by and she would meet with them. But anything that was scheduled in advance was on her calendar, yes.
Did she enter items directly on her calendar, or did they always run through you?
Both.
Would they go into the same electronic calendar?
Yes. Mhm.
Was there any kind of tracking system, whether or not you could indicate whether or not a scheduled meeting actually occurred?
No, I don't think we kept a tracking system. If it was on the calendar, it occurred. And if for some reason it did not occur, it was not removed from the calendar.
And if something were canceled, would that be indicated on the calendar?
No, not necessarily.
On the calendar, were there some meetings that were in person and some meetings on the telephone?
Yes.
And how were those designated on the calendar?
As I recall, I would just indicate that it was by phone on the calendar.
What if a meeting was rescheduled? How would that be noted on the calendar?
Well, if it was, excuse me, if it was rescheduled in advance, it would have just been removed from the calendar and moved to the appropriate time and day.
Did you prepare a written agenda for Ms. Simon's meetings?
Yes.
Do you know whether or not other people would prepare agendas for those meetings and send them to you in advance?
No. No, they would not.
Where would you get the items that you would put on your agenda for President Simon?
From President Simon.
Did you receive any instructions from President Simon after meetings about agenda items?
Not very often. She had a system where she would indicate on the agenda items that were discussed, would have a check mark. Items that were completed, she would put an X through the numbered item on the agenda.
This was on her written copy of the agenda?
Yes.
And would she then return that to you after a meeting?
Yes.
How long did you use that system of the check mark and the X's?
Oh, I think that was the entire time I worked for her.
So for 10 years?
I think so, yeah.
When you reviewed those agendas after the meetings, what would you do with the items that had a check mark?
When I prepared the agenda for the next meeting, those items with a check mark, those items would appear on the agenda.
And what if they were an X?
They would not appear on the next agenda.
You drop them off?
Yes.
Okay. Probably goes without saying, but it sounds like you're a detail-oriented person.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And what about with regard to President Simon? Could you describe her management style that you observed over the 10 years that you worked for her?
Your Honor, just for the record, I ask for a continuing objection on this line of questioning based on my prior objection.
Okay, the record will show your continuing objection.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you describe her management style for the court?
About everything that happened on campus. She was detail-oriented. She was hands-on relating to items that she needed to be hands-on with. She also, of course, would delegate responsibilities.
Was she a good boss?
A good boss? Yes.
Okay. Sal, let me show you what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 13 and ask you if you could identify that document for the record.
Yes, this looks like one of her weekly electronic agendas.
Is that the printout from the electronic calendar that you maintain?
Yes, I'm not sure if it was printed from my computer because it says L.A.K. Simon on the bottom. It might have been printed from her computer.
During what time frame?
The top one is April 28, 2014 through May 4th, 2014. The next page is May 5th, 2014 through May 11, 2014. The next page is May 12, 2014 through May 18, 2014. The next page is May 19, 2014 through May 25th, 2014. And the last page is May 26, 2014 through June 1, 2014.
With the admission of proposed exhibit 13?
Any objection?
The objection, Your Honor, is that it would be hearsay.
Well, I think it's a business record or something that's in the ordinary course of business. I'm going to admit it.
Thank you, Your Honor. If you could take a look at Wednesday on President Simon's calendar. In the morning, was there a meeting with regard to a congressional survey?
Yes,
What time was that meeting?
from 9:15 a.m. to 10 a.m.
And where was that meeting supposed to take place?
It doesn't say.
In a calendar item like that, where there's not a specific location, what was the practice between you and Ms. Simon? How would she know where that meeting was at?
She probably would have known from the materials that had been prepared for that meeting.
She wouldn't necessarily designate a meeting place on the calendar?
Correct.
Looking at May 16, 2014, was President Simon in the office that day?
It appears that she was not.
Okay. Does it indicate on the calendar where she would have been?
Yes. From 8 to 10:30, she would have been at a meeting in Williamston. From 11:30 to noon, she was in a meeting at the Kellogg Center. And then from 12 noon until 7:30 p.m., she was, it just says out of town.
I'm sorry, say the last part?
Out of town.
Okay. Could you turn to May 19th, 2014?
Okay.
Was Ms. Simon in the office that morning?
Hang on a second. Your Honor, I'm sorry, I'm going to object. She can testify what the calendar reflects, but if the question is, was she actually in the office on these dates or was she outside the office, then he has to lay a foundation that she's aware of that, and I don't know how she possibly would be. The best she can testify to is what the calendar says, and that's it. So I object based on lack of personal knowledge and foundation.
I can rephrase, sir. Ms. Howe, if Ms. Simon would have had meetings outside of the office, would those have been indicated on the calendar?
Yes.
And if she had meetings that were in the office, would those also be indicated on the calendar?
Yes.
And if she had phone meetings, would those be indicated on the calendar?
Yes.
And I believe I asked you before, but either you or President Simon had the ability to enter items in the calendar. All of her items were entered on there unless it were a last-second addition. Is that true?
Yes.
So on May 19th, can you tell me where Ms. Simon was with regard to what her calendar says?
Okay, just so we're clear, if he's asking her to say what the calendar says, then I have no objection.
What is it?
Okay.
It appears from the calendar that she was in the office except from 1 to 2 when she had a meeting at the library.
And why do you say that?
Because library is in parentheses after the notation of her meeting.
And is that how you would indicate a different location then?
Generally, yes.
That morning, was there a meeting scheduled with Paulette Granberry Russell?
Yes.
What time?
10:15 to 11 o'clock.
Based on the calendar, was that to be an in-person meeting or a phone meeting or a meeting at some other location?
Based on the calendar in person.
Did Ms. Simon have meetings before 10:15 on that morning?
Yes.
And where were those at?
In her office.
What time was her first one?
Her first one, well, it wasn't actually a meeting. Her first entry is from 8 to 8:30 desk time. From 8:30 to 9 o'clock would have been a conference or a phone meeting. 9:30 to 9:45, there was a meeting in her office. And then 10:15 to 11 was Paulette Granberry Russell's monthly meeting that's noted in her office.
So that I don't have to keep objecting every time. Can I have, can it be clear that when this witness is asked, did she have this meeting? Where was she at this time? Who was that meeting with? That all of those questions refer to what her calendar says in that regard and not her personal knowledge.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Getting those sort of credit for that person's knowledge.
Right.
Things that happened back in 2014.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Howe, do you have any reason to doubt the entries that are on that calendar? Do you have any reason as we sit here today to think Ms. Simons was somewhere else based on your personal knowledge?
No.
Okay.
Ms. Howe, let me show you what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 14
And ask you to identify that for the record.
Excuse me, this is an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell, May 19 of 2014 at 10:15.
Did you prepare that agenda?
Yes, I believe I did.
When I asked you earlier about written agendas for those meetings with direct reports, is this an example of what I asked you about?
Yes.
Move the admission of proposed exhibit 14.
Yes, Your Honor. The most that this witness can testify to is that she made the type entries on this agenda. There are also a variety of handwritten notes, and there has been no testimony regarding who made the notes, but more importantly, when the notes were made. So if he's offering it to admit the entire exhibit, including the notes, there has been absolutely no foundation laid for it. Finally, Your Honor, I would object based on relevancy, since the name Nasser does not appear anywhere on this agenda.
Okay, I'm going to admit it only for the purpose of having in the record the typed words there. And I will note that although the name Nasser may not be on there, this May 19th, 2014 date seems to be a key throughout this whole procedure.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Howe, for the 10 years that you worked for President Simon, did you have the responsibility of reading her handwriting?
Yes, I did.
How often?
Daily.
When you got the agendas back from Ms. Simon after those meetings with her direct reports that I asked you about earlier, did she make notes on those agendas?
Yes.
And did you have to read those notes?
No.
Okay, what did you do with those notes? I'm sorry, with those agendas after you received them back?
They would have been put, each direct report had their own file folder. And when I got the agendas back from President Simon, I would file it in the file folder, in this case for Paulette Granberry Russell.
If you could look at People's Exhibit 14, do you recognize the handwriting on that agenda?
Yes.
And whose handwriting is it?
President Simon.
Based on the practice that you outlined for us earlier, would it have been standard practice for Ms. Simon to give you that agenda after her meeting with Paulette?
Yes.
And would you take action based on the notes on that meeting agenda?
Not necessarily. If there was some specific action she wanted me to take regarding notes on the agenda, she would tell me or send an additional note out so that I would know that.
Well, you testified earlier about a system that you had for checks and X's.
Yes.
When you look at that agenda, are there marks like the ones that you described earlier in your testimony on that agenda?
Yes.
Okay. And could you review those and tell the court, based on the system that you had with Ms. Simon in 2014, what items were discussed on that agenda?
The items that were discussed was number 1, office restructuring, number 6, admissions, number 7, OEI issue, number 8, MSUBA, number 10, sexual assault cases, number 11, neighborhood intercultural team, number 20, advancing culture of inclusion, and an agenda item that she hand wrote on here, which was number 26, which is Project 6050.
Your Honor, excuse me, there are notes next to other agenda items that the witness didn't identify as being discussed. And if she wasn't in the meeting, how could she possibly have personal knowledge of what items on this document were discussed and were not discussed? All she can testify to is what these notes say, what they line up with, or what they're written next to each item here. But she wasn't at the meeting. She doesn't have personal knowledge. She can't possibly say what was discussed or what was not discussed at this meeting.
Actually, Your Honor, I'm not sure Mr. Silver heard the prior testimony, but there's a system that's been in place during the entire 10 years that they worked together with regard to the items that were checked off and the items that were X'd out. And that's exactly what I asked Ms. Howe to identify for the record. And don't talk over me, please. Let me finish. And she is now testifying to that system as it applied to the May 14th document.
Was your question for the X-out ones or the checked ones?
My first one was the checked out ones. I was going to follow back up.
The ones that she would follow through on.
Yes.
Okay. So does that explain it?
No, it doesn't, Your Honor, because what she testified the check mark means is continue that item on to the next month's agenda. The X one, she testified, I believe, means you don't have to put it on next month's agenda. But that has nothing to do with what items were actually discussed during the meeting on May 19th. All that has to do with is what items she wants continued on the next agenda or what items she does not want continued on the next agenda. And my point is, if Ms. Howe was not present for the meeting, which she was not, she lacks personal knowledge as to what issues or items were discussed during that meeting.
Would you agree that the answer then just goes to show which items President Simon wanted to have continued on to the next agenda, as opposed to ones she didn't want to return to again?
Well, Your Honor, as I understood Ms. Howe's testimony, their system was the check mark meant we talked about it and I want to continue it on to the next month. I believe that's what she testified to, and so that's why.
We're talking about her having any knowledge of being present in the meeting. She's just interpreting the checks and the X's related to the handwriting on the exhibit.
Is that correct, Mr. Teeter?
Well, again, what I heard Ms. Howe testify to, that on the agenda would be checked the items that were discussed, and she was to continue those into the next month. And the items that were Xed off were to be removed from the agenda for the next month. Okay. So, Ms. Howe, under the sexual assault cases, was that checked for the May 19, 2014 agenda item?
Yes.
Alongside the sexual assault cases, are there handwritten notes from President Simon?
Yes.
Can you read those for the court?
COM, both issues, court case.
And then were there items that were X'd out on that agenda that you were not to then put on the following agenda?
Yes.
And what were those?
Number 17, safety education meeting. Number 18, OCAT/OSS. Number 23, McCaskill survey. 24, 10th anniversary of task force. 25, training for Corps.
Thank you. Your Honor, this objection is simple. The court's already addressed something like it. This is a Rule 106 rule of completeness objection. The prosecution seeks to admit what looks like this. I'm going to walk up and show the court in a minute if Your Honor would allow me to. This is what's been offered in evidence. We received this document last week, just recently from the prosecution, as part of a 3-page document. And as the court can see for itself, there is a notation on the first page that the prosecution seeks to admit that says "see attached." We contend that under Rule 106 it is imperative that the attachment of the 3-page document be considered at the time it is introduced to the witness. I'm happy to reserve voir dire on this particular piece for cross, but it has to be introduced at the same time because otherwise it's taken completely out of context. May I approach to show the court what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Thank you.
So it looks like there are 2 agendas for that date.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So any objection to including them all together?
I'm not sure which document he's referring to.
Sure.
One moment, Your Honor. Your Honor, for the record, I've amended proposed exhibit 28H to include a second and a third page
which is as we produce those items to the defense.
Okay, and that takes care of your problem, Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes, Your Honor, that satisfies right now the completeness objection. Thank you.
Okay, I'll admit it over the prior objection.
Thank you, Russell.
Let me show you what's been marked as proposed exhibit 28I and ask you to identify that for the record.
Yes, this is an agenda, excuse me, prepared for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on September 11, 2014, 10:15 a.m.
Was that prepared in the same way as the other agenda items you've testified to
Yes,
and received back from President Simon in the same manner?
yes.
Move the admission of 28I.
Admit it over the objection.
So starting with 28A, just take a look at that and tell the court, is Title IX an agenda item on that agenda, and that was dated, January 13th, 2014?
Yes, it's item number 13 on the agenda. Title IX implementation.
But there's not a check mark next to that, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Going to 28B, is Title IX on that agenda, and that's dated February 20th of 2014?
Yes, item number 13.
And is OCR on that agenda?
Yes.
What
Oh,
item?
wait. Oh.
Sorry, I forgot to ask you too. On 28A, is sexual assault cases listed on that agenda?
Yes, it is, item number 10.
Back to February, this is Exhibit 28B. Are there check marks on that agenda?
Yes, there are.
Is there one for Title IX?
Yes, there is.
What's the handwritten note next to that say?
I don't know.
And you said OCR is written by President Simons? That's
Yes.
for handwritten?
Yes,
And is there a check mark with that?
yes.
Let me show you 28C. Is sexual assault cases on that agenda item from March?
Yes,
Is it checked?
yes,
How about Title IX?
yes. Title IX implementation 13.
Is that checked?
No.
And how about OCR?
It is on here, handwritten by President Simon, and it is checked.
Let me show you 28D. Is sexual assault cases on that agenda from April?
It is.
Is it checked?
It is.
How about Title IX?
Yes,
Is it checked?
yes,
How about OCR?
yes,
And is it checked?
yes.
And we already reviewed the May 19th agenda, but is sexual assault cases on there?
Yes,
Is it checked?
yes,
And that was the note that you read that's next to it? Okay. And what about Title IX?
yes.
Is it on there?
It is on here, it's not checked.
Okay. And what about OCR?
Yes, it is on here, it's not checked.
June 2014?
Can I ask, it's not checked, does it also not have an extra?
Oh, I'm sorry, I should clarify that.
Correct, there's no marking. Yeah.
And is sexual assault cases on that agenda?
It is.
Is it checked?
There's no marking.
Okay. Of any kind?
Right.
How about Title IX?
It's on here, there's no marking of any kind.
And OCR?
Is on here, there's no marking of any kind.
What is the item that's checked?
Office restructuring?
Let me show you or People's Exhibit 28G. The sexual assault cases on that agenda for, is that July?
July 1st. Yes, it is.
Is it checked?
Yes, it is.
Is there any writing with it?
Yes.
What is that writing?
I believe it says strategy for I'm not sure what that last word is.
Okay. And then what about Title IX?
Yes, there's no mark by it.
What about OCR?
Yes, there's a check mark.
People's Exhibit 28H, and this is from August. The sexual assault cases on that agenda?
Yes.
Any markings?
No.
What about Title IX?
Yes.
Any
No
mark-
markings.
What about OCR?
Yes, there's a check mark.
And 28I, this is the September agenda. The sexual assault cases on that agenda?
Yes,
Any markings?
it's a check mark.
And Title IX?
Title IX is on here, there's no marking.
And how about OCR?
OCR is here, there's no marking.
Ms. Howe, as part of your responsibilities working with President Simon, did you handle correspondence either coming into or leaving from President Simon's office?
Yes,
And was that part of your normal responsibilities?
yes.
Let me show you what's marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 30 and ask you if you identify this document.
I don't recall this document.
You say you do not recognize that document?
I do not.
Ms. Howe, in your testimony, you indicated that you prepared a written agenda, you gave it to Ms. Simon for the meeting. But when you would receive it back, did you also receive back agendas that had been prepared by the other party in that meeting?
No, not typically.
Do you know whether or not Paulette Granberry Russell prepared a written agenda for the meetings with President Simon?
I don't know.
I'm sure it's been marked as proposed exhibit 33A. Can I ask you to identify that document for the record?
It's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on July 11, 2012.
And was that prepared in the same way as the other ones that you had testified about?
Yes.
And did you receive that back, President Simon, in the same manner or the same markings?
Yes.
Okay. Move the admission of proposed exhibit 33A.
Same objections as I made with respect to 28, A through I or whatever it was, exactly the same. But in addition, Your Honor, we're now going back to 2012, and so I thought 28 was completely irrelevant, and I think that these agendas that predate this alleged meeting that took place between Dr. Simon and Ms. Russell on May 19, 2014 are so far removed from any relevancy in this case that I
So President Paulette Granberry Russell dealt with the issues of the Title IX, and not only the Dear Colleague letter, but also the specific complaints that were filed in 2011-2012, and what impact, if any, that had on their specific area of compliance with Title IX, but then also, that as part of her responsibilities in running Title IX office, that she had contact with President Simon, making her aware of not only the Title IX, but sexual assault cases and well, actually both of those things. Well, and I did ask her about the office, how it was staffed, all of those things. On 2012 agenda 2033A, excuse me, I just had this witness identified. Sexual assault cases are listed there, and in President Simon's handwriting, OCR review. And that was, of course, one of the conditional objections is, could those issues be tied to President Simon with her own handwriting? Yes. So we believe it is absolutely relevant that she was aware of the OCR investigation that stemmed from the complaints, and that started all the way back in 2012 and ran all the way through 2015 when that settlement was finally reached.
Okay, so these agendas are all related to Paulette Granberry Russell?
Yes, they're the same way as the ones we just went through, except these go all the way back to 2012 and run 2012 to 2013. The batch that we had just admitted were 2014.
Your Honor, this is very, very simple. These agendas and this witness cannot shed any light on what the substance of these discussions were. So that testimony on what they discussed regarding OCR review, whatever it is Mr. Teeter is talking about, has to come from Paulette Granberry Russell. And she has already testified on these subjects about her recollection of what they discussed. So what do these agendas add to that if they can't shed any light on the substance of the discussion?
They add to the record that there were meetings between Paulette Granberry Russell, who was very involved in the OCR investigation and Title IX, child sexual assault, one-on-one meetings with Dr. Simon on all these dates, if that's what the proof shows, that those issues or some of those issues were discussed. So whether they were actually discussed or what was said, it's not even necessary. They were standard monthly fare for conversations between Dr. Simon and Paulette Granberry Russell. And that's the relevance I find there.
Thank you. Again, Ms. Howell, let me show you proposed exhibit 33A. That is an agenda from July 11th, 2012.
Is that one prepared in the same way as the other agendas you testified about?
Yes,
And the same kind of markings when you received it back from President Simon?
yes.
Move the admission of 33A.
Submitted over the continuing objections.
Thank you.
And what is agenda item number 11?
Sexual assault cases?
And is there any markings on it?
Yes, there's a check mark.
And is there any writing next to it?
Yes, it says OCR review.
Ms. Sawyer was marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 33B and ask you to identify that document for the record.
Yes, it's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell to be held on August 21st, 2012.
Is that another agenda prepared by you for that regular monthly meeting
Yes,
and received back from President Simon in the same manner as the other ones you've testified to?
yes.
Move the admission of Proposed Exhibit 33B.
Same objections, Your Honor.
Admitted.
What is agenda item number 11?
Subject to the same.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Agenda item number 11, what is it?
Sexual assault cases?
And is there any handwriting next to it?
There is.
And what is that?
Mandatory, looks like program. And then there's a /OCR.
Those proposed exhibit 33C and ask you to identify that for the record.
Yes, it's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell for September 10th, 2012.
Prepared in the same way as the other ones you've testified about
Yes,
and received back from President Simon with the same kind of markings.
yes.
Move the admission of 33C.
Admitted subject to the same objections.
Thank you. And agenda item number 11, what is it?
Sexual assault cases?
And any markings?
Yes, there's a check mark.
And any writing?
Yes.
What is it?
It says OCR. The next word might be interviews, but I'm not certain.
And agenda item 14, what is that?
Title IX implementation.
And any markings?
There's a check mark.
Any writing?
Yes, it says Law College.
Let me show you what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 33D and ask you to identify that document for the record.
Yes, it's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on October of 2012.
As the other agendas?
Yes,
And received back from President Simon with the same kind of markings?
yes.
Move the admission of proposed exhibit 33D.
Admitted subject to the same objections.
Thank you.
And agenda item 10, what is it?
Sexual assault cases?
And any markings on that one?
No.
How about number 13?
13 is Title IX implementation.
And any markings on that?
There's a check mark.
And any writing next to it?
OCR visit. And then there's an asterisk OCR workshop.
Heard in the same way as the other agendas you've testified about?
Yes,
Received back with the same kind of markings from President Simon?
yes.
Move the admission of 33E.
Admitted subject to the same continuing objections.
Item number 10 on that agenda, well, actually, go back. Item number 1, what is that?
Office restructuring.
And is there any check marks on that?
There's a check mark.
Any writing next to it?
Yes.
What is that?
It looks as though it says vision.
And agenda item 10,
10, yes, there's a check mark and it's sexual assault cases.
Any writing next to it?
Yes.
What does it say?
24 cases, e.g. preliminary reviews and real cases. Only 3 open now.
And then item number 13, what is that one?
Item 13 is Title IX implementation.
Any check mark next to it?
No, there's no check.
Is there writing?
Yes.
And what does that say?
College of Law coordinator, I believe.
We started with mark this proposed exhibit 33F and ask you to identify that for the record.
Yes, it's a meeting, an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on February 11, 2013.
Prepared by you in the same way as the other ones?
Yes.
And received back from President Simon in the same manner as the other ones?
Yes.
Move the admission of 33F.
Admitted subject to the same objections.
Item number 10, what was that?
Sexual assault cases,
Any markings?
check mark.
Any writing?
Yes, it says ER. Then there's an asterisk. It says educational campaign. And beneath that, it looks like it might be Landry.
Other agendas?
Yes.
And item number 10 on the agenda is what?
Sexual assault cases.
Any markings?
It has a check mark.
Any writing?
Yes.
And what is it?
Gross and reported cases.
And number 13?
Number 13 is Title IX implementation. There's no marking.
So it was marked as proposed exhibit 33H and ask you to identify that for the record.
Yes, it's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on April 10 of 2013.
Prepared by you in the same manner as the other agendas you've testified about?
Yes.
Received back from President Simon in the same way with the same kind of markings?
Yes.
Move the admission of 33H.
Admitted subject to the same objection.
And item number 10 on that agenda?
Sexual assault cases.
And any markings?
There's a check mark.
Any writing?
Yes.
And what does it say?
First word is reported. The next word I'm not sure what the next word is. And then it says known, I think, or unknowing.
Yeah, but office restructuring, what's the tendency to that of this case? I agree, there's something on office restructuring there, a check mark and a note next to it, but I thought we were talking about these are relevant, you said, because they mentioned OCR or sexual assault cases, and there's nothing that reflects OCR or anything about sexual assault cases is reflected on this agenda.
You said there was.
Actually, Your Honor, you don't need to show it to you. It'll be easier. Both of those items are listed on the agenda. Office restructuring is on there. Ms. Russell indicated that she didn't necessarily talk to Ms. Simon about that, and yet she did. In addition to that, it goes to show the level of detail of President Simon's involvement in the items that Paulette Granberry Russell was talking to her about.
Where does it say
OCR.
OCR.
No, sexual assault cases, number 10, and Title IX, number 13. So it's still, and again, I asked her that specific question. Was that a standing item on your agenda?
I think it was. And that's my point. It's being carried over onto the agenda by Dr. Simon.
Okay, Your Honor, I respectfully disagree, but at a minimum, you have to give me that there's no evidence that anything was discussed at this meeting regarding sexual assault cases or Title IX implementation.
I wouldn't say there's no evidence. There's less evidence than if there were a check mark there. But the main thing I'm taking it for is that Dr. Simon thought it was important enough to include it on the agenda and to leave it unmarked so that it would go on the next month's agenda as well. So it just appears that she's supervising that issue. So I'm committing it over all the objections.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Ms. Howe, could you look at item number 14? What is that on the agenda?
Intercollegiate athletics.
And is that checked?
It is.
And is there handwriting next to that?
There is.
And what is that?
Sexual assault education went well.
Showing you what's marked as 33J, and ask you to identify that for the record.
Yeah, it's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on September 18 of 2013.
Was that prepared in the same manner as the other agendas you've testified about?
Yes.
And received back from President Simon in the same manner?
Yes.
Move the admission of 33J.
Committed over the same objections.
Item number 10, what is it on the agenda?
Sexual assault cases.
Is there any markings?
There's a check mark.
Any writing?
Yes.
What is that?
It says opening of school, reports, looks like as found investigation.
And is there an arrow up before reports?
Yes.
Okay. And also item number 13, what was that?
13 is Title IX implementation.
There's no markings on that one though, right?
Correct.
There's a handwritten note in agenda item 23. Can you read that?
Yes, Cleary report.
And it's got an X in it?
Yes.
Do you know what Cleary report stands for?
My understanding was the Cleary report, I think it was an annual report that was prepared that dealt with the number of crimes or criminal investigations on campus.
And the X would indicate that was resolved and you don't need to put it on the next agenda?
Correct.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as proposed exhibit 33K and ask you to identify that one for the record.
Yes, it's a, an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell for October 11, 2013.
Prepared by you in the same way as the other agendas?
Yes.
Received back from President Simon with the same kind of markings?
Yes.
Move the admission of 33K.
Committed over the same objections.
Agenda item number 1, what is that one?
Office restructuring,
Any markings?
a check mark.
Any writing?
It says marketing.
Item number 10.
Item number 10 is sexual assault cases.
There's no check mark next to that one, is that right?
Correct.
But is there handwriting?
There is.
What is that?
24 reported.
In number 13?
13 is Title IX implementation with no markings.
I'll show you what's been marked as proposed exhibit 33L and ask you to identify that one for the record.
Yes, it's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell to be held on November 18, 2013.
Prepared by you
Yes.
and received back from President Simon with the same kind of markings?
Yes.
Move the admission of 33L.
Committed over the same objections.
And item number 1, what was that one?
Office restructuring.
Any markings?
Yes, there's a check mark.
And any writing?
Yes.
What does it say?
The first word, I'm not sure what the first word is. Then there's a slash, and it looks like Porteous, and in parentheses, proceed.
Agenda item number 10. Oh, did you say
Proceed.
Porteous or then proceed?
Porteous, I think is what that says. And then in parentheses below it, proceed.
How do you spell
Portious.
Do you know what that stands for?
There was a member of the Board of Trustees by the name of Dave Porteous.
Okay. And item number 10,
Item number 10 is sexual assault cases.
any markings?
There's a check mark.
Any writing?
Yes.
And what does it say?
New OCR complaint. And beyond that, it says 22 since October 7. And it looks like agenda of the I'm not sure. Below that it says 60-day OFCCP is what it looks like to me.
Do you know what those initials stand for?
No. I may have known at that time. I don't recall.
Let me show you what's marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 33M and ask you to identify that for the record.
It's an agenda for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell to be held on November 19th, 2014.
Prepared by you
Yes.
in the same way the other agendas were prepared?
Yes.
Received back from President Simon in the same way?
Yes.
Move the admission of 33M.
Admitted over objection.
Agenda item 10, could you read that?
Sexual assault cases?
And any check mark?
No, there's not.
But is there any writing next to it?
It looks like, yes, there is. It looks as though it says investigation. That may or may not be correct. And the second word, I'm not sure.
Item number 13. What is that?
Title IX implementation?
Any check marks or
No.
writing?
No.
Okay. Item number 21.
Yes, it says OCR.
And any check mark?
There is a check mark.
Let me show you what's marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 33N and ask you to identify that. N as in Nancy.
It's an agenda prepared for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on December 15, 2014.
Prepared by you in the same way the other agendas were?
Yes.
Received back from President Simon in the same way?
Yes.
Move the admission of 33N.
Admitted over objection.
Under item number 1, what was that?
Office restructuring?
Any check mark?
No.
Any writing?
Yes.
What does the writing say?
It looks like additional staff, add external person, not able yet to add into existing and new position. And in parentheses below that, do we need to add another person? It looks like for externally.
Agenda item number 10.
Item number 10 is sexual assault cases.
Any check marks or any writing?
No.
Item number 13.
Item 13 is Title IX implementation.
Any check marks or writing?
No.
Item number 21.
Item number 21 is OCR.
Any check marks or writing?
No.
Let me show you what's been marked as proposed exhibit 33O and ask you to identify that for the record.
Yes, it's an agenda prepared for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on January 21 of 2015. I'll get some in a minute. Thanks. Thank you.
Was that agenda prepared by you in the same manner as the other agendas you testified about?
Yes.
And received back from President Simon with the same kind of markings and writing?
Yes.
Move the admission of proposed exhibit 33O.
Submitted over standing objections.
Thank you, Your Honor. And item number 1, what is that on that agenda?
Office restructuring?
Any check mark?
No.
Is there writing?
Yes.
And what is that writing?
Staff issue, Facebook, judgment. I'm not sure of the next word. There's an arrow that says offer in parentheses. There are 2 words. I'm not sure what they are.
Agenda item number 10. What is that?
Sexual assault cases?
Any check marks or writing?
No.
Item number 13. What is that?
Title IX implementation?
Any check marks?
No.
Any writing?
Yes.
And what does it say?
Town hall survey, MSU and AAU compliance. Faculty. I'm not sure what the last word is.
Is that e-learning? Can you tell?
It does, yes, it does look like e-learning. Yes.
Agenda item 21.
Item 21 is OCR.
Any check marks or writing?
No.
And the second page of that agenda is an org chart. You see that?
I do.
And it's an org chart for what area?
The Office for Inclusion and Intercultural Initiatives.
So what chart?
An org chart?
Organization.
Yeah.
Chart.
And that's for which area?
Office for Inclusion and Intercultural Initiatives.
And that was Paulette Granberry Russell's area?
It was.
Let me show you what's been marked as People's Proposed Exhibit 33P, as in Paul.
Yes, it's an agenda prepared for a meeting with Paulette Granberry Russell on October 26, 2015.
Prepared by you in the same way the other agendas have been?
I retired January of 2015.
Okay, so this was after.
This
you
was
retired?
after, yeah.
Okay. Now, at the bottom of that agenda, there's a, what do they call that, a tagline? The one on the bottom indicates the location in the file?
Yes.
And what, is there a specific place President Simon's agendas were kept?
Yes.
And specifically for the meetings with Paulette Granberry Russell?
Yes.
And what was that tracer line?
S:/Simon/agenda-Russell-102615
Is that the same place that you kept the other agendas?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of proposed exhibit 33P under the understanding that we had with counsel that these were received from MSU pursuant to our subpoena and the certification of their records, kept in the same tracer line file as the other agendas that were produced pursuant to that same subpoena.
Do you have an agreement about that, Mr. Silver?
Your Honor, we agreed to authenticity, period. That is what we agreed to. We did not agree to foundation. We agreed to authenticity. If
Ms. Howe was retired, then obviously she didn't prepare this, and there is no foundation. So I want to be very clear, Your Honor, I am not reneging on any agreement I have with Mr. Teeter, but our agreement is very specific on authenticity, not foundation. And in addition, at least the copy that I have has multiple pages behind P. I don't know if the witness copy does, but I have no idea what those records are. I can't imagine, since Ms. Howe was retired, she has any idea what that is. So, yes, I object to 33P.
That's fine, Your Honor. We'll clarify from this point forward. There will be no stipulations with regard to.
Laundry will be
Let me check that. Just a couple more minutes.
Okay, I'm going to call it quits for the day soon, but if you just have
Yeah, I just have a few more, and then maybe we can end it.
another 5 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
I should correct my testimony. Six.
Okay.
I misstated that.
It is no longer admitted. Or
Thank you, Your Honor. Hang on a sec. You're looking at a document. Can you describe the record what that document is?
Excuse me, this is a list of core members, which were her vice presidents. And it has a list.
Your Honor, with the court's indulgence, I would not move that in as a public exhibit just because there's personal phone numbers, personal cells, and all of that. But by referencing that document, can you tell us what the main contact number for Paulette Granberry Russell was during this time period?
Yes, her office.
are we?
That's office phone.
It's
Right?
office.
Office phone.
Okay.
Yeah. Her office number was 517-353-3924.
And then do you know who her administrative assistant was?
Jennifer Mitchner,
And what was Jennifer's contact number at the office?
517-353-3923. I'm sorry. You have to reverse those.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me try that again.
Yeah.
Paulette Granberry Russell's phone
Yeah.
number, then her office number?
Yes, I'm sorry. Paulette's direct number was 517-353-3923.
And Jennifer Mitchner's number?
517-353-3924.
And does that document have President Simon's contact information on it?
It does.
Okay, what was her office number?
The main office number was 517-355-6560.
That was the main office number?
I'm sorry, I don't remember if that was the main office number or the number that went directly to her desk.
Okay, that would have been the number to contact her?
Yeah. Yes.
And at the time that you were there during 2014 and up into 2015, did Luana K. Simon have a cell phone that was provided by MSU?
Yes.
What was that cell phone number at that time?
517-285-5299.
And did President Simon carry more than one cell phone at that time?
No.
And would she use that phone for both business and personal calls?
Yes.
Was there a process by which MSU would reconcile what were personal calls and what were business calls because
Yes.
they were providing the phone?
Yes.
Okay. Did they, I take it, pay and supply the phone, and was there some process by which Ms. Simon would reimburse them for personal calls? Or do you know?
Yes, I know she
Excuse me, what is the relevancy of whether or not she reimbursed them for personal calls or not? This has nothing to do with it.
No, that's fine, Your Honor. I'll withdraw that question. So other than the cell phone that you just gave us, you're not aware of any other cell phone that President Simon carried during that time?
I am not.
Okay. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Okay, we are going to recess for today. So we're going to have to come back for cross-examination, I'm sure. In the meantime, please don't talk to anyone about the case except your attorney. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah, one other thing, Your Honor. I don't know where we're going to end up on June 11th, which is our next day, whether we're going to conclude or not. But in the category of wishful thinking that we do conclude, we need to be prepared for any type of closing argument. So I don't know if you want briefs, and we do have legal issues, Your Honor, we would like to brief. Whether you want briefs and a closing statement made, whether you just want a closing statement and no briefs, which I hope is not the case, but so that we can be prepared when we come back on June 11th. I need to have an idea, please, what you would like for some sort of closing or post preliminary hearing exam briefs, whatever you want. But we hope you will at least allow briefs. And if you want closing too, that's great. But I need to know what you'd like.
Okay, well, I'll allow briefs. Do you want a closing argument, Mr. Teeter?
Yes, Your Honor.
So why don't
If the
we
court
have-
would find out.
So we'll do.
Probably would. So closing arguments right after the end of testimony. You know, if you need half hours to get ready, so we give it to you.
Thank you.
And then followed by briefs.
Perfect, Your Honor. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Your Honor.
Very good. I think we're done for that today.
Thank you, Your Honor. June 11th, then?
I guess. Sorry we can't get you in sooner.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Teeter, I got a question.
Sure. Only a couple.
This.
We are.